Hello and welcome to another Friday episode of World Traveler Cooking. Today we're heading into the Christmas season, and so we're going to make an Irish holiday special known in Ireland as spiced beef. In the US they call this corned beef, and they eat it on St. Patrick's Day. In Ireland they actually eat it typically around Christmas. This is basically a spice-cured beef. It has black pepper, juniper berries, and allspice as the primary seasoning. And it's also a dry, brined beef. So this will be something that people can find interesting. And if you ever want to make it yourself, feel free. Now, the one thing I'm going to note is that I'm using prague powder today. This is a nitrite-based preservative. The recipe will be primarily oriented around the use of nitrite. You can use nitrate, in other words, saltpeter, and I will also provide instructions for, or the proportions necessary for that. So if you're using nitrite, though, you use a lot less than you would if it was nitrate. Nitrate is also used for curing bacon and a bunch of other applications. At any rate, I'm going to go over my ingredients here. We have a kilogram of, typically they would use what they call silverside. I had trouble getting that at a reasonable price, so I'm using topside. That's basically top round. Silverside is sort of eye of round is probably the best way of thinking about that. And it's typically named because you have this silvery membrane of gristle on one side. To use that, you will need to trim that membrane off. Since I'm using top side, I'm not going to need to worry about that. A spice mixture is about a tablespoon of peppercorns, black peppercorns, about 2 tablespoons of allspice, and about 2 tablespoons of juniper berries. Now, most of the recipes I've seen say grind these in a spice grinder. I think that's a terrible idea with juniper berries. I think they gum everything up. So we're going to grind everything but the juniper berries through a spice grinder, and then the juniper berries will kind of get mashed into the rest of it. And then for our salts, I will pan the video onto this in a moment, but I have brown sugar. And you want about 1/4 cup. I'm using less because I have a stronger, more compact brown sugar. About 1/4 cup of salt and about 1/2 teaspoon of prague powder. You don't want very much, and you almost never use very much of prague powder. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by grinding this, but I will show you the salty and the salt and sugar ingredients, the ones that give it the osmotic pressure to drag the liquids out of the beef directly. I think I have a little more salt there than I need, so I'll probably put some salt back. So, seen from the top side, we have our black peppercorns, our allspice, and our juniper berries. We have our brown sugar, we have our salt, and we have our prague powder. And again, I think that looks like too much salt, so I will measure it out again and put some back. So next we will prepare our spice mixture. We will start mixing the prague powder, the sugar, and the salt together. This is especially important if, like this brown sugar, it's a hard brown sugar, or if your brown sugar is just solidified. So I'm just going to crush those pieces. We'll mix these pieces together. Then I will add in my ground spices. And I should get a dry rub for the, or it's actually kind of a dry brine for the for the meat. Meat, what am I thinking? I ended up having to, one thing is that pepper grinders don't work very well for grinding allspice because it's too big, and allspice, despite feeling a little bit softer, has a very hard kernel, and I think that also caused some problems. So I had to use the ulik. I didn't show you me working with it I've done that in enough Indonesian videos. But you know, good traditional grinding stone like a Mexican mortar and pestle or an ulek will make fast work of the spices for you. So I have this nicely mixed. I'm going to stir in my spices. And the reason I mix the salts together first is because you really want the prague powder to be relatively even in this. And so you don't want lumps of prague powder, and this distributes the prague powder more than any of the other components. So once this is nicely even here, then we will start rubbing it into the beef. Yeah, so this is looking about right. So now I'm just going to switch this around here. And again, this is top side. Normally you'd want silverside, but this will be fine. And this came a little bit frozen. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell whether I'm getting fresh or frozen here in Indonesia. So, but I'm sure it'll work. I've made gravlax out of frozen salmon before. It's not ideal, but it does work. Same basic idea here. Just like gravlax is a dry brined salmon, this is a dry brined beef. The only difference is we are going to cook this. We would not cook, say, gravlax. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this, I'm going to press it in, pretty much the whole thing. And then I'm going to flip it. I don't know, which side shall I do next? I'll go do this side. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take this and I'm going to rub it and push it all over the meat. Now, if you do end up using a fatter cut, I mean, traditionally it is silverside, but some people use rump roast, so I'm sure if you can use rump, you can use top side. If you do use a fattier cut, remember to remove a fair bit of the fat. You're going to leave a little bit on, but this should be a fairly lean dish. So, now let's do the same up over here. And basically, I'm going to use the nice, wonderful stickiness of the brown sugar to basically pack this dry brine all over this meat. And what will happen is, as this sits in the refrigerator for a week, it will start drawing liquid out of the meat. Probably should have pulled that. Yeah, I'm going to pull this off. Should I? No, I'm not going to worry about it. I've seen commercial corned beefs with something of this silvery stuff on. So I'm still going to pack it everywhere, including on top of this membrane. But I'm not going to worry about removing that this time. I may regret it, but we'll see. And some recipes I've seen say do this in one container and then transfer it to another. I'm doing it in the same container I'm going to brine it in, just because as the liquid comes out, that way it'll mix with whatever is still stuck in the bottom of the container. Sugar is used in this regard partly because it doesn't penetrate the meat as quickly as salt does, and so you still get the osmotic pressure, but you don't get as much saltiness into the beef. If you were to use salt, you would end up with a much saltier product, and the sugar mostly still kind of sits in the brine, so you don't have to worry about it from a dietary perspective as much. You can hear the call to prayer in the background. Okay, so now I'm going to cover this with a bit of plastic wrap. And then we'll just kind of let this sit for a while. Maybe after a day or two, I might take the plastic wrap off and flip it around. But that's probably optional. This should nicely dry brine just as it is. So now it's been 7 days. I have flipped this over several times and it's very dark. So we're going to tie this up with string and we will boil it for about, or we'll simmer it for about 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this up. I'll show it to you first and then after we tie it up. Let's go ahead and get started. So just holding this, you can feel it's a lot more dry, so we will tie this up into two compact masses and set them on to simmer. And this wasn't really just because it was top round, it was actually mostly because it was cut at the butcher this way. So that happens sometimes, you gotta live with it. So now this is covered in water. I just added water, you can see how dark it is just from the brine. And now I'm going to go ahead and put it on. We will simmer it for another 45 minutes or so. And it should be ready for tasting. So I'm sure your first impression is, that doesn't look very appetizing. But let's go ahead and cut the string and slice it up the smaller piece. So now I'm going to go ahead and do a taste test. I'm just going to put a few pieces on a plate. And then we'll go. And try it. And now for the taste test. So this is not like an American corned beef. This is a bit different. The flavors really come together nicely. You have the pepper from the peppercorns, you have the allspice, and you have the juniper. And they're really, really, really good together. You don't get a lot of sugar, and it's not that salty, but it's really, really tasty. This is great. And again, this is kind of more of a traditional Irish corned beef or spiced beef. Highly recommend this one, especially around holidays.